Here we are in a LionSong Creative Expedition. Thank you for coming. And today's topic is creative contact. This is a topic that is very dear to my heart, and I'll do my best to explain why. Okay, the purpose of LionSong, as I understand it at this stage, is that it's a way to work with building loving relationships intrapsychically, so among the different parts of our self, and basically back with source. So I like to refer to God or the Tao or whatever is the right word for you, use your own word. I tend to say source or the inner wild. And the reason I like that phrasing is because the inner wild, to me, that phrase summons up the feeling of source, which is like big, beautiful, pristine, mystical, magical, in a positive sense. Like the aspect of our shared being, which is so beautiful, so big, so pristine, so pure, so ineffable that it kind of silences us or brings out reverence and feelings of love and connection and cohesion and unity. So that's the type of feeling tone I'm getting at. And I also really relate to the feminine expression of source. So mother arc, or the mother aspect, which I feel like is very visible in nature. So we see the way that the inner wild is kind of nurturing, giving space for, and it's kind of the background to all these ecosystems. And sometimes I like to think of it that, you know, parts of us, we're like the little animals and the trees and the elements and all the things that live inside the ecosystem of the inner wild. So the inner wild is kind of this background, this space which affords our existence. So why contact? So contact with the inner wild and among these different parts of ourselves is basically the solution to all the pain and the problems that come out of that pain. And you can almost think of this as like from an attachment or bonding perspective, that where there are severed bonds or there's fragmentation, isolation, dissociation, like separation of parts of the self, that is inherently extremely painful and essentially unnatural at a certain point. Like I believe we're supposed to, you know, differentiate out of source, but there comes a point of differentiation where we've lost the connection to our origin, and that's where this place of severe pain comes from. Now we're all like these, you know, like the image of a, you know, porcelain teapot is whole, and then one day it's shattered and it's broken, and there's all these little pieces, and each little piece has like a piece of the design and, you know, would fit next to this other piece. And that's the work that we are all doing in one way or another. Reuniting these pieces, reestablishing contact, gluing us back together in the place that we really belong. And this is like one way of thinking about the reunification project that I believe we are all, those of us who are here today, are working on this piece in one way or another. Finding our way back to unity, cohesion, wholeness. And contact is how we glue these parts together, how we give a sense of belonging and cohesion. And there's kind of communication and reconnection, and sometimes a synthesizing of certain energies, bringing polarities together, meeting. So just contact in the sense of two parts meeting, touching. We're going to play with this aspect today using the arts. The arts are a wonderful vehicle for the self-reunification project and the shared self-reunification project. So through partly helping us become aware of the pain of the different parts inside of us and establishing the kind of healing, reconnective, bonding contact, which will heal those parts of their separation, their loneliness, and their pain. And of course, the separation, the loneliness, and the pain is what is underlying all negative, destructive, counterproductive behaviors that we may engage in or observe in the field, in the behavior of others. At the root of that is the pain of being disconnected from each other, from ourselves, from source. So the puzzle pieces will, can be reversed or playing out some negative storyline. The cure on the ultimate level is to reconnect that puzzle piece where it belongs, inside the source self, the shared holistic picture, and the unity. And the unity is missing. Every part that's gone needs to be found and brought back. And if that part has turned into a nasty, mean little part, the unity is still going to try its hardest to establish a loving contact with that part and bring it back in as possible. So that's the work. That's what we're playing with. And thinking of these different parts of the teapot, like the little fragments, we can recognize certain flavors of different parts. So one that we may be very familiar with are our inner orphans. So these are like the parts that feel young and childlike and maybe weak and powerless or harmed, hurt, the victim parts, the parts that have been wounded. And these ones are missing their mother, their true father, their true mother, their true whole self. And these inner orphan parts, need to be reconnected. And we also have these other parts, which are maybe like a little bit of a, instead of the soft, vulnerable child, this is like the older part, maybe like a teenager, maybe they're taking on a bit of more of a bully part. They might have a negative expression in terms of acting out behavior, addiction or, self-punishment or, creating drama. These are the parts that we tend to be a little bit more maybe rejecting of, just like a real teenager, because they're harder to deal with and it's harder to understand what their pain is. And then of course, we shouldn't forget that we have also our own whole self. So the part of us that is not destroyed, which was never shattered. And this part is like maybe the big self, the source self, who you would be in a different world where there isn't all this fragmentation. And I like to call this part, sometimes I like to call this part big friend. And big friend is, just a really lovely aspect. It's you, but in your most wonderful version, big, powerful, joyful, hilarious, creative, the part that's fully connected to source and doesn't have any kind of trauma about it. And then there's little friend, which might be a little bit more like your ordinary self. If you're like me, you're not always feeling fully reconnected to source. In fact, you might be more in one of these little fragment parts or observing a fragment part, relating to it, trying to fight off one of the more difficult parts or whatever, like a little more in struggle town, not having a good time. Life is hard. So that's more of the little friend. And overall, the reunification of big friend with little friend is a very healing idea. All right, so I'm gonna start the process soon, but I just want to let these ideas sit in you, that when we talk about contact, it's really just witness, it's meet and greet. We're not changing anybody. If a part comes in, if a part trusts you enough to come in, some kind of weird energy, even if it's difficult or it's kind of nah energy, We're just going to meet it. Observe any reactions that you, counter reactions from another part. Another part might be scared of it, whatever. It's all okay. Because we want all our own true inner parts to come to the party that we are having. We want everyone to feel invited, of our true self parts. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to let in, you know, extra dimensional entities and bad energies. Of course, please don't let those in. It's not your job to heal them. But to the extent that there's a little piece of us that entity is torturing, and we can get that little piece back, that's very positive, of course. And all of our own true parts are welcome at the party. We want to get to know them. We want to hear their story. We want to know what their burdens are, why they behave the way they do, what they have been through. And through the listening, through the love, the acceptance, the reconnection, the, oh yeah, I know you, you're part of me. We belong together, and we're all part of the big source self. Through that process, that is what heals. The reconnection, the bonds, the remembering that we are all part of the same being and family and belong in the same ecosystem, that there's no part of us that is not allowed to be within us. Okay, so that's a little bit where we're going to be playing today. As I lead the process, a couple things to keep in mind. You may or may not get images that go along with what you do. If you do, cool. If you don't worry about it. It may or may not be fun and easy and flowy. It might be more awkward or strange, especially because you're following along to my facilitation and you might not know what I mean, and all of that is normal. Anytime you're doing something for the first time, there may be some grace, but there also may be plenty of awkwardness and weirdness, and that is totally okay. Let yourself be as ugly or awkward or weird or boring as you like. Nobody's watching you. So just explore in your own time. And if you've come across an inner part who tries really hard to do it right, that's okay too. We all have that part. So we're just going to kind of like gently notice, witness everybody who comes in. And there's this, I think this is from Pema Chodron, but I really love it. It's like touching a bubble with a feather. Like if you had a big ostrich feather, I always visualize, and you're trying to like touch a bubble. You want to be that gentle about whatever comes in, acknowledging it with that much kind of like, yeah, okay, here you are, very gentle. So whatever comes up, we're going to try to be nice to it. All right? If you get freezy, constricted, dissociating, that kind of stuff, like sort of a trauma response, come out of it, just drop it and go into some kind of posture that feels safe and good to you. Follow what feels comfy, good to the body, warm, safe, and relaxed. There's no value in powering through or pushing through or overriding if you are having a reaction that's saying, I can't go into this material right now. Okay, so take care of yourself. And I am going to start the process now.